Lessons learned generally come by making mistakes, which is fine, but learning those lessons, we have to also try to find out how are these mistakes being present in our life. Let's talk about mistakes and the lessons that we learn from our mistakes. Are the mistakes we are making truly coming from an honest place? Or are the mistakes we are making coming from an egotistical place? We all have to learn lessons, and those lessons will come by mistakes. We have to be very careful in how the mistakes are coming about in our lives. Lessons learned do not have to come the hard way. So let's define mistakes. A mistake, an action or judgment that is misguided or wrong. This is the general definition that we use. But in law, mistakes are recognized as three types: common, mutual, and unilateral. So common mistakes are made without intent. It is general as to most people will make simply for the lack of not knowing. Mutual mistakes are made where there is a misinterpretation of information between two or more parties. And the unilateral mistake is with intent, when one knows about a mistake and take advantage of the mistake for their own personal gain. As I stated earlier, mistakes are inevitable, but very necessary. But if there is no corrections and or lessons learned, you will continuously repeat the same mistakes, which will lead you to staying in survival mode. In order for correction, though, we first must know what kind of mistakes were made. Was it common? Was it mutual? Or was it unilateral? Unfortunately, as we look around society, we can see most of our mistakes are unilateral. And those unilateral mistakes always come at a heavy price that will be paid. Unfortunately, most of the time when this kind of mistake is made, it is made with an intent and it is governed by our emotions, our ego, and our pride, which doesn't allow us to be honest with ourselves. The lesson learned will be paid at that heavy price in which we cannot afford. 3 high-profile examples I would like to address because they were made public, and through them I learned a lesson, but I learned it for free. Let's talk about the Tasha K and Cardi B lawsuit, the unilateral mistake. Tasha did a live on April 4th of this year. She was gracious enough to talk in detail about her current situation and titled that video, "I'm in a Bind." She stated a few things that happened during the court process. What she found out was most attorneys were Cardi B fans, and it became difficult to find attorneys that would be impartial and fair. On top of her non-existing, unexpected budget, she could not afford to hire the high-priced attorneys that were needed and necessary. So she resorted to hiring attorneys who only had 5 years of experience, no experience with dealing with defamation cases, and some of them have never tried a court case through the federal process, and that led to federal protocols not being followed. Of course, this was not known to her in the beginning. It wasn't until she lost her second appeal, her attorneys made a unilateral mistake by not letting her know they are not in any position to deal with this kind of case. Just to know that all of this could have been avoided is quite sad. To not know someone personally and to go after them every time you speak is appalling. It is noted that Cardi did try to reach out to Tasha over and over, asking her to stop talking about her, to stop spreading lies, but Tasha kept it going. It is alleged that Tasha would have stopped if Cardi agreed to an interview. Expectantly, Cardi denied the request, so the lies, the bashing, and the bullying continue. It is believed that Cardi sent Tasha a cease and desist notice, but that only increased the lies, the bashing, and the bullying. Cardi took to the courts, and Tasha was served papers. At this point, a sane person would have stopped, but once again, it was on, and Tasha would never let up. The bashing continued to the point when Tasha was in court and her videos were played. As Tasha stated, she was embarrassed to watch and to hear herself. But once again, she would not stop. It continued. And she kept it going before, during, and after the decision. Now that the court made their decision of almost $4 million, that should have sparked change. But because the mistake was unilateral, the bullying got worse. Statements Tasha made about she's going to fight to the end and she's not going to pay because she ain't got it, laughing and giving away money that she did not have. But through Tasha's own words, we know she really doesn't have it. She had to sell properties and valued possessions. Her bank accounts were frozen, no money left to file an appeal, so the decision is said. As of April 21st, Cardi allegedly put in the necessary paperwork for all future earnings just to make up penalties for Tasha that she cannot afford. Now she's in debt for malicious intent. She had no choice but to send an apology to Cardi and her legal team, vowing nothing like this will ever happen again. The mutual mistake. 6ix9ine did an interview on April 6th of this year, and he talked about his situation. After spending a career, in my view, ranting and screaming on any and everyone he chose, acting like a tough guy with all his goons around, he felt big and untouchable. But once again, unforeseen incidents happened and the worst was exposed. He stated the tough guys he surrounded himself with had a street code of honor and loyalty. But to his mutual mistake, he realized the truth. The truth he had to learn at the lowest point of his life, when he really needed them. But it gets worse. His ranting and raving and screaming led to the worst injuries possible, which he had to be hospitalized for. Now, those injuries will last him a lifetime. But during the interview, he sounded like a new person. His voice was low, calm, cool, and collective. Instead of ranting and screaming, now he is only focused on his health and music. Instead of having so-called friends that follow in the lead street code around him, he chooses to stay low with only needed personnel around him, both sounding humble after their misfortune. And what their misfortune has cost them, a price they cannot afford to pay. But their mouths wrote checks that their ass cannot afford to cash. But nonetheless, the checks was and will be cash. I am so grateful for the both of them for sharing their stories. Both seem to have learned from their mistakes and are now focused on trying to live better or becoming the better version of themselves. The common mistake, Blac Chyna, according to her, was put in situations at an early age with abuse and neglect and not being taught or shown how or why to love herself. She became a victim of what society wanted and how society reinforced the deep down thoughts of feelings of neglect and unwantedness. That same society, as she went on to state, will promote the fakeness that she built herself and her career around. With all the fame and attention received, something was still missing: authenticity. The God within will always let it be known to go inward to fix what is needed. Because this mistake is common, she listened to the God voice inside and corrected herself in her own way, at her own time, and at her own pace. She is on a journey to becoming the better version of herself. And now we are presented with the new and improved natural beauty of Angela White. As you can see the differences between Angela's mistake compared to the previous two, she now speaks with pride, dignity, and the sense of self-love, removing everything that will remind her of Blac Chyna, returning back to Angela White, and she did it on her own terms. And the penalty she paid was something she could afford. Becoming the better version of self is priceless. If learning lessons has to come by making mutual or unilateral mistakes, it's going to add an additional burden that some of us may not be able to pass through. Just having to learn from our common mistakes are difficult in and of itself, because it deals with looking inward, and sometimes being honest with ourselves is hard to do, and it takes years to face. In becoming the better versions of ourselves, you and only you will find and know the need to change instead of making mutual or unilateral mistakes, which forces you to change. Life has already dealt us an unfair hand, and after a prolonged time, we then realize the need to change, and we seek the change that we know we need. Every step we take to becoming the better versions of ourselves is one step that we should be proud of. Just a little self-improvement goes a long way by opening up the door for more improvement. The price that you pay by making common mistakes always allows correction to be done at our own pace and at our own time and in our own way. We all have our separate path that will lead us to realizing we are much bigger than our past experiences. We are not defined by what we went through. We are liberated by the strength it took us to break through. Let us make it a little easier on ourselves by making common mistakes and learning vicariously from others that choose to make the two latter. I realize that self-realization is the greatest gift you can give to the world, but self-preservation is the greatest gift you give to yourself. Don't let your mistakes dim your light. Use it to brighten it. Becoming the master of your fate, the master of your soul, and the captain of self. When you are free, God lives within you, and through you, we see God. So let's start the journey together, understanding there is only one of us, one universe, one love, and one consciousness. And let us always remember to stay curious and to conquer it all. See you on the other side.